Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to another episode of My Hair Looks Better in the Mirror Than It Does on Camera. Kidding. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. And as you can see, we're going right back down the rabbit hole. And you can obviously see when I told you we were not done yet with Dr. Andrew Wakefield that I was very much not kidding. We're going to be going into another documentation. But before we do, a little bit of background real quick, and then we'll get to the disclaimers and the usual trigger warnings. So this is a document that has to do with the fact that after the 2010 decision that removed Dr. Andrew Wakefield's ability to practice medicine in the UK, as well as the retraction of the Lancet paper back in 2010, one of the doctors that was a part of that study, in particular Professor John Walker Smith, won in appeal in regards to the original 2010 findings. Now, for some people, they have touted that, propaganda-wise, as exonerating the paper and all the doctors involved when it does exactly no such thing whatsoever. But you know how these individuals in propaganda go, especially if you follow me for my most longest running series against the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center. That's what these individuals do. They'll take what are winning on technicalities and try to turn it into something that completely exonerates them when it doesn't. But the public is always going to go with the headlines. They're not going to be reading the details. People like me, as autistics, as folks who are obsessed with and hyper focused on details, we're the ones who tend to read a little bit more beyond the headlines. But the majority of the world is not made up of people like me. It's made up of neurotypicals. They get their news literally from headlines, whether it's on the newsstands at the grocery store or whether they see a brief headline before checking their email at night or scrolling through YouTube. Most folks don't usually have the attention span or the energy to read these articles because we are simultaneously one of the most overworked uh, at the same time because of the type of work we have now and the technical age. You get where I'm going, right? People come home from work, they're exhausted, they want to know what's in the news, they're going to look at the headlines, and then they're going to binge watch something to kind of detox from their day. They're not going to spend more time reading over stuff like this. So they're going to go with what the narrative is going to be pointing towards. And usually, in regards to the media, if it says that the ruling got overturned, that's all they're going to go with. They don't have the time or energy to continue to read anything after that. But thankfully, that's why people like me exist. So I can go over the details with you in a somewhat like amateurish podcastian type of style. So we can go over the things that most folks miss because let's face it, we simply don't have the energy. We are overworked, not given nearly enough leisure time, and by the time we get home at the end of our day, we just want to turn our brains off. The only problem is, I kind of can't. I'm autistic. The details jump and I'm gonna dig. I can't help it. It's my nature. But I'm gonna help you by doing the digging for you and just talking to you about it. So, disclaimers for the Down the Rabbit Hole series. Every single little bit of information we go over throughout the entirety of this series, in particular with a prevalent focus on the rise of the current anti-vax movement as we know it, that has gone from being obscure and laughed at to suddenly taking over HHS, it's important to understand how it all came to this, in my opinion. So, that's what we're doing here with going over Andrew Wakefield and all of that history. But all sources are going to be right there in the description box for you. So should you like to go ahead and deep dive on the sources, whether it's to have a good, fair, and civil debate in the comment section based off of facts, or whether you want to deep dive the subject on your own, you're welcome to do so. Political trigger warning. If you are extreme left or extreme right, I am not. I'm independent, and I don't mean from the independent party. I mean very specifically, I vote on individuals, not party. So, that being said, more than likely, I am probably going to say something throughout this series or one of the others that's going to offend you. If you're unable to handle that in a civil manner and immediately go to name calling, your comment will be removed and you will be blocked. Nobody has time for that. Literally nobody. Take a good look around and read the room, for the love of God. Alright? Regular trigger warnings. This channel is marked not for kids for a reason. I do use profanity, and some of the topics we cover, like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center, for example, are pretty dark. So if you have a child that is 16 and younger and they're watching the channel, parental supervision is advised, alright? Okay, so this is from an expert commentary series. Andrew Wakefield has never been exonerated. Why Justice Smitting's decision in the Professor John Walker Smith case does not apply to Wakefield. So this idea that because this individual got exonerated does not mean that Wakefield did. So we're going to go ahead and read on through this here. This was a document that went out in August the 1st of 2016, so a few years ago. All right, so it gives some links in there as well, and don't worry, we will include the link to this, so should you like to deep dive on some of the links it's providing here, you'll definitely be able to do so. It looks like that they're hyperlinked as well, so you should just be able to click on it and go straight to it. All right, let's get into the introduction, shall we? On March 7th, 2012, Mr. Justice Smitting of the UK's High Court of Justice published the court's decision in the Professor John Walker Smith case, appealing the General Medical Council's revocation of his medical license, Smitting 2012. So specifically, they gave him back his license to practice medicine in the UK, not Andrew Wakefield's. But let's go ahead and continue. It did not take long for the anti-vaccination websites to post articles referring to the court's decision, emphasizing that Walker Smith and by implication Wakefield had been exonerated, which is not what happened at all. What's happening is these cases were viewed as separate. So, if you separate defendants, that means you got one dude who got exonerated, one dude who did not. So, there is no innocent by association. There's literally never innocent by association. There's guilty by association, but not innocent by association. Alright? This paper will show that Justice Smitting's decision in no way exonerated Wakefield, that even with regard to John Walker Smith, the decision was based on a procedural error, not factual innocence. So we're going to be getting into what they considered literally procedural error. In addition, despite what anti-vaccinists have written, Justice Smitting's decision also made clear that he considered the research showing no relationship between the MMR vaccine and autism to be established science. Alright, so we're going to get into the background here. Andrew Wakefield is a prominent figure among those who fear that vaccines cause more harm than good. When the UK's General Medical Council revoked his license, his supporters saw a political move to silence his criticism of the vaccine safety and his claims that vaccines, the MMR in particular, played a casual role in the rise of autism and other childhood disabilities. We got to get out of this mentality that we have been stuck in the last decade, where for some reason that escapes me, we believe that literally everything is a goddamn conspiracy. Sometimes doctors are corrupt, evil pieces of shit that are actually caught and prosecuted because they were doing some shady shit. These men are not always martyrs. Sometimes justice really does get it right. Okay? You can't assume just because that he was founded for misconduct, just because it disagrees with your insanity doesn't make the judgment incorrect. Okay? But obviously it was political. They had to discredit and attack him because then the vaccines, the pharmacies would lose out on millions of dollars because of vaccines. All right, we're going to continue, but before we do, I'm so tired of the narrative, but they don't want the vaccines to be revoked because that's where they make their money. So we're going to do something a little bit different. Okay, so how much yearly do pharmaceutical? Okay, we're going to take a look at this per year. Per year. Okay. So what we're looking at right now, the vaccine market is 78.0 billion as of 24. By 2029, they do expect it to go up to 94.9 billion. The next question that I asked, how much yearly do pharmaceuticals make on prescriptions per year? The U.S. pharmaceutical companies generate hundreds of billions of dollars annually from drug sales. In 2021, it was sitting at $603 billion. $603 billion. Okay. pull this up here. It's called Immunize for Good, Fact or Fiction. Here we are, folks. The cost of giving vaccines is often more than the amount that insurers and health plans reimburse physicians for them. Doctors' offices have costs for staffing, supplies, and utilities. Even if a doctor gets paid back for giving a vaccine, the cost of storing them and providing them can offset any profit. Physicians are experts in kids' health. They make recommendations based on research and their years of study and experience treating illness. So, very glad they put that disclaimer in, and I'm not sad for having read it. So, the money pharmaceutical companies make from vaccines is a small portion of their revenue. That's what I was wanting to get to. Vaccines are produced and sold by pharmaceutical companies. These companies are for profit and make money on the medications they develop. They make most of their money from selling medicines that treat diseases and other health conditions. People take these medicines after they get sick. In 2022, pharmaceutical companies reported $605 billion in revenue. Of that revenue, just $1 of every 12 was from vaccines. Allow me to read that to you again. In 2022, pharmaceutical companies reported $605 billion in revenue. Of that revenue, just $1 out of every 12 was from vaccines. Okay? So what is that telling us? What percentage do vaccines So, I'm trying to get, because I want to get you guys an exact percentage. There we are. This will be the link we include. Okay, so Statistica's Health Market Outlook total vaccine revenue, not only COVID vaccines, so MMR and everything, amount to $89 billion this year, which is less than 10%. 10% of global pharmaceutical sales, which are projected to reach 1.5 trillion in 2021. So this was a few years ago, folks. So what is this telling us? It's very simple. It's the fact of the matter is that billion may sound like a whole lot until you compare it with a pharmaceuticals company overall yearly revenue. And then, what is the percentage of the revenue made by vaccines? Less than 10%. When you put that in perspective in regards to overall profit that pharmaceutical company makes in a year, they could literally stop doing vaccines tomorrow. Tomorrow, and still have absolutely nothing stopping them from getting into the higher billions and reaching the trillion mark eventually. 10%, less than 10%, is not counting for much in their overall revenue. So, anti-vaxxers, would you like to know in layman's terms exactly what that means? That means the overall power that pharmaceutical companies hold is nothing to do with vaccines. It is the fact because they are the ones who manufacture the medicine we all need to live. That's where they make their money. Vaccines are literally a good PR stunt and a decent tax write off at the end of the year when it's time for taxes. That's it. Vaccines literally cost them more to actually give them than it does to not give them because they have to pay for all of that storage, all of making sure everything is sterile, the chemicals needed specifically to make sure everything's clean the way it's supposed to be. So, yeah, this argument of they're trying because they know it will hit them in the wallet. You might hit me in the wallet these days and perhaps get $5, but I can tell you this, I'm doing well enough where, although major things like the whole reconstruction, that's going to have to wait a minute, but I can lose that $5 and not all of a sudden freak out and declare all is lost. I'll still flinch, but you get my point.